Welcome to Witch Hunt Podcast special episode for International Women's Day 2025. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah Jack. Thanks for joining us for our International Women's Day episode. The theme this year is Accelerate Action.
Around the world right now, women and girls are being accused of witchcraft, torn from their homes, beaten, exiled, and killed. Today, we're diving into how International Women's Day has already made a real difference in this fight, and you'll find out exactly how in this episode.
That's right. When we started this podcast together in 2022, I never imagined the reality we'd uncover. Stories that rarely make headlines, but are happening in communities across the globe.
Today, we'll explain what's behind the meaning of International Women's Day and connect it directly to how it has accelerated action in advocacy against modern witchcraft accusations.
We'll share what's been happening on the ground, the campaigns that are working, and the women who are taking action, whose voices we need to listen to carefully.
This podcast is not just a collection of discussions. It's a toolkit of information. Today's episode will be useful to you for advocating for yourself as a woman. And if you're not a woman, it's a toolkit of information that will be useful to you to advocate for gender equality.
When you understand human rights, women's rights, you'll find your voice. Stay with us and discover how powerful that voice can be.
Sarah, what is International Women's Day?
International Women's Day is celebrated annually on March 8th and honors women's achievements across all aspects of life, social, economic, cultural, and political, while advocating for gender equality worldwide. It's more than just a celebration, and it represents a call to action for accelerating gender equality and provides a crucial platform for community engagement, progress reflection, and commitment to positive change.
Let's take a look at some key moments in International Women's Day's evolution.
In 1857, women textile workers in New York City marched on March 8th, protesting unfair working conditions and demanding equal rights.
In 1910, Clara Zetkin proposed the idea of an International Women's Day at the Second International Socialist Women's Conference, receiving unanimous support from women representing 17 countries.
A year later, in 1911, the first International Women's Day was marked across Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland, with over 1 million participants.
In 1917, women in Russia staged a strike for bread and peace, protesting food shortages and war conditions.
Jumping to 1975, the United Nations officially recognized International Women's Day, declaring 1975 as International Women's Year.
In 1996, the United Nations launched its first International Women's Day theme, celebrating the past, planning for the future.
In 2001, the International Women's Day website launched as a free resource hub to grow mainstream awareness. Please check that out. And that website is internationalwomensday.com.
In 2010, the United Nations established UN Women, its gender equality body.
Let's talk about the 20s. In 2020, the Witches of Scotland campaign was launched by Claire Mitchell, QC, and Zoe Feditozzi. The campaign has 3 aims: to obtain a pardon for those convicted as witches under the Witchcraft Act 1563 in Scotland, to obtain an apology for all those accused, and to obtain a national memorial to remember those killed as witches.
In 2022, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon acknowledged innocent victims of the witch trials. She said, "Today, on International Women's Day, as First Minister on behalf of the Scottish Government, I am choosing to acknowledge that egregious historic injustice and extend a formal posthumous apology to all of those accused, convicted, vilified, or executed under the Witchcraft Act of 1563.
In May of 2022, the Church of Scotland apologized.
In July 2022, Elizabeth Johnson Jr. was exonerated in Massachusetts.
And in 2022, our podcast launched to fight for the exoneration of Connecticut witch trial victims. Our grandmothers were arrested for accusations of diabolical witchcraft in colonial America.
That same year, we formed End Witch Hunts nonprofit.
And in 2023, our podcast participated for the first time in International Women's Day, interviewing Dr. Ann Little.
Also in 2023, Witch Hunt Podcast began our first in a continuing series of interviews with women who are advocating against modern-day witchcraft accusations.
2023 saw Connecticut exonerating 9 women hanged for witchcraft in colonial Connecticut.
And in 2024, End Witch Hunts traveled to talk about witch trials exoneration in the United States at 2 universities in England.
And this year, 2025, 78% of our listeners are women, and 24% of our listeners are in countries outside the U.S.
In 2025, exoneration legislation has been introduced in Massachusetts and Maryland to clear the names of women accused of witchcraft in the colonial period. Also this year, Witches of Scotland has released a special tartan for the women accused of witchcraft under the Witchcraft Act of 1563.
It's a living memorial, and its pattern and colors represent that history and those women. And the world is excited about it.
They even got it down to the specific stitch count to represent the numbers of people who were accused and the years of persecution.
Congratulations, Witches of Scotland, for your success, and we expect more.
Let's talk about International Women's Day today.
From grassroots activism to global celebration, it has grown into a powerful worldwide movement with significant mainstream awareness. It continues to be marked by a diverse group in vastly different ways. We're marking it with our podcast, and all are equally valid and impactful efforts.
Sarah, could you tell our audience how they can participate in International Women's Day this year?
You can support women-focused charities like our organization, which is a proud member of the International Women's Day community. You can donate to us through endwitchhunts.org/donate, and you're helping us to educate about false accusations of witchcraft against women and supporting advocacy for those affected by this form of gender-based violence.
So why is International Women's Day so important?
It's a recognition that gender inequality persists through pervasive mechanisms. From medical research centered on male bodies, to products designed without women in mind, to the unequal distribution of invisible household labor, to linguistic biases that normalize male dominance, to workplace dynamics that systematically undervalue women's contributions and potential.
These structural inequalities provide context for understanding another dimension of gender-based persecution, the way societies have historically, and still do, vilify and attack women through baseless accusations of witchcraft and diabolical power.
International Women's Day is truly inclusive. All participation helps ensure that progress toward equality remains on the global agenda and positive actions prevail.
For example, in 2021, on International Women's Day, the Witches of Scotland launched their podcast.
And on the same day in 2022, Scotland's First Minister acknowledged innocent victims of their witch trials.
And then in 2023, Witch Hunt Podcast participated for the first time in International Women's Day.
Why is International Women's Day so significant to the campaigns working to have innocent victims of witch hunts acknowledged?
Well, witchcraft accusations are not widely acknowledged as a problem for women, but this is a good opportunity to get attention to this important matter.
What have we covered on previous International Women's Day?
In our first International Women's Day special, Professor Ann Little reminded us that, though much progress remains to be made to achieve equality for women, society has made a great deal of progress since the days of our grandmothers and their grandmothers. And now here's the highlight from our episode with Dr. Little.
Women can vote, women can organize, women can run for the House, the Senate, Congress, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that young people are too easily talked out of their own power and self-control. And I think at least what I try to do as a professor, is to try to talk people up and give them encouragement and try to get them to see really how great things are. Certainly compared to their great-grandmothers and their great-great-grandmothers' generations. And even then, that wasn't so bad compared to, I don't know, Salem 1692, where the only power that some of those young women felt was the power to tear somebody down, right? To bring down an older, maybe more authoritative woman. Now, young women have the power to get as much education as they want, to do anything they want, to get any kind of job they want, to travel anywhere they want. And I think that we need to remind them of that and what a unique and marvelous thing that is. International Women's Day 2024 was themed Inspire Inclusion, and we invited Dr. Samantha Spence. She demonstrated how intersectional approaches are crucial for addressing the diverse experiences of women accused of witchcraft, considering factors such as age, economic status, and cultural background. This involves tailoring support services to meet the specific needs of these women. And now here's a highlight from our episode with Samantha Spence.
Another thing that's key is supporting health and well-being, because access to healthcare, including sexual and reproductive healthcare services, is vital for women's health and well-being. And in many places, there's barriers and stigmas attached that women don't receive this care. We need to promote this.
And this year's campaign theme is Accelerate Action.
And as you've heard, International Women's Day is a collective movement. So collectively, we can accelerate action for gender equality.
Indeed, it'll take all of us.
The International Women's Day organization is reporting that at the current rate of progress, it will take until 2158, which is roughly 5 generations from now, to reach full gender parity, according to data from the World Economic Forum.
So this is why we need to accelerate action. Focusing on the need to accelerate action emphasizes the importance of taking swift and decisive steps to achieve gender equality. It calls for increased momentum and urgency in addressing the systemic barriers and biases that women face, both in personal and in professional spheres.
Now, we would like to share what we've heard from our experts on how women are affected by witchcraft accusations today.
Expert guests noted that women are disproportionately targeted in witch hunts and face social exclusion, economic marginalization, family disruption, psychological trauma, and physical violence. Limited status, loss of property, loss of security, and loss of reputation are also impacts that disproportionately affect women and girls. Expert guests also emphasized the importance of exoneration and formal acknowledgement to counteract these effects. You can hear stories of these experiences and the impacts of witchcraft accusations on women in our previous episodes.
As individuals, we should be doing many things to accelerate action. You need to talk about it, publish about it, create events around it, and donate efforts to support it.
Through our expert interviews, we've pulled together a collection of voices that no one else has collected. From scores of highly educated women who have dedicated their professional careers to accelerating action for women, we have learned that women can accelerate action against inequality, gender-based violence, and accusations of witchcraft by employing multifaceted strategies that challenge societal norms, empower women, and foster supportive communities.
Now we're going to talk about those strategies that we learned about in our podcast. Methods for accelerating action include challenging gender norms and stereotypes by promoting positive representation of women in media, education, and popular culture to challenge harmful stereotypes that perpetuate inequality. And that's something we're hearing about on social media every day.
Yes. Another method for accelerating action for women is to promote inclusivity and social justice for everyone to especially benefit women. And as men, we need to be good allies and promote inclusivity and social justice for women in all of our actions. And we should challenge our own gender norms and stereotypes and beliefs.
We need everybody. Men can be part of the problem, but they're also part of the solution. And we need that. We need everybody to work together, because if everybody's not working together, then you're not going to win this battle. And that's what we need, a more holistic approach of everybody on the same page.
Our legal experts have told us that we need to enforce laws that criminalize harmful practices and ensure accountability for perpetrators of violence against women, including against women accused of witchcraft.
Another way that we can all help is to engage in awareness campaigns and educational initiatives that dispel myths, challenge stigma, and promote understanding of the harms of witchcraft accusations and other forms of gender-based violence.
We can also support and amplify the voices of women's organizations, grassroots leaders, and advocates working to combat gender-based violence and witchcraft accusations at the local level. That means using your platform to amplify.
Use your voice to help promote the economic empowerment of women through equipping them with tools and resources to achieve financial independence and stable livelihoods, enhancing their self-esteem and agency.
A very key support that women need, especially who have been accused of witchcraft, is mental health support. We need to support programs that ensure access to mental health services, counseling, and peer support groups around the world and in local communities to help women heal from trauma, rebuild self-esteem, and develop coping strategies and community.
We all also should be promoting female leadership, supporting women's representation and leadership in all spheres of society, amplifying their voices and influence in decision-making processes.
Having women in leadership just shows that actually this can be done. This isn't impossible to those people that are being told constantly that it is impossible. And the mere presence of a woman in a leadership role sends a powerful message that actually they can do this, and that gender-based violence needs to be addressed. It empowers other women.
We welcome men to come in. It's very important that you also get involved in this, because you can't make changes in a patriarchal society without buy-in from the patriarchs.
We have lots of men ally advocates on Witch Hunt podcasts, so be sure to listen to their episodes to see how that's done. It's true, women have been fighting for equality for centuries and still do not have it. Women are not witches, but they are often accused of witchcraft as a form of social control and dehumanization. Understanding the historical and sociological factors that contribute to witchcraft accusations can help develop more effective strategies for prevention and intervention.
As we speak right now, the United Nations Human Rights Council is hosting its annual meeting in Geneva, Switzerland. And Sarah is going to share with us a press release from human rights experts addressed to the United States.
Our organization, End Witch Hunts, supports this call for action. The new U.S. administration must recommit to human rights at home and abroad. UN human rights experts today expressed concerns about the new U.S. administration's recent actions that undermine human rights and fundamental freedoms at both domestic and international levels and harm the UN Charter-based international order, and called to the United States as well as the international community to recommit to human rights. They issued the following statement. As government leaders and representatives from all over the world gather in Geneva this week for the 58th session of the Human Rights Council, we are concerned by the attempts of the new U.S. administration to weaken domestic human rights protections, harm the international human rights and humanitarian systems, roll back decades of progress on gender equality, and undermine international institutions and civil society worldwide. We call on all states to reaffirm their full commitment to the multilateral international order with human rights and freedoms at its core, and to demonstrate their readiness to defend it. We are alarmed by the United States' escalating attacks on the international architecture of human rights, the rule of law, multilateralism, the principles of sovereign equality and self-determination, and vital international agreements on peace and security, climate change, global justice, and international cooperation. Rather than weakening it, the United States must play a pivotal role in strengthening the multilateral system and its institutions, with the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at its core that it was instrumental in co-creating. The UN Charter prohibits the threat of use of force against the territorial integrity and political independence of member states. Threats to reclaim the Panama Canal, take over, and own Gaza by forcibly expelling the Palestinian population, make extortionate demands on Ukraine for its critical minerals as a price for support to resist Russia's war of aggression, or gain control of Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark, are blatantly illegal acts under international law. Any attempt to undermine the territorial integrity of sovereign states and the inalienable right to self-determination of peoples of those states should stop. We are deeply concerned by the abrupt decisions of the United States to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, as well as international institutions such as the Human Rights Council and the World Health Organization, and to review its participation in the United Nations and other international organizations. The U.S. decision to use these sanctions against the International Criminal Court and its personnel, and to threaten anyone who collaborates with them, is a direct attempt to weaken the rule of international law, human rights, and global justice. The United States is also cutting international assistance dramatically, including by eliminating agencies such as USAID and ceasing funding to the United Nations Relief Work Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. All these actions have already had and will continue to have serious, real-world impacts affecting the lives, well-being, livelihoods, and human rights of hundreds of millions of people, including the most vulnerable or marginalized populations. These regressive actions are not happening in a vacuum, but take place alongside an active undermining of respect for human rights within the United States. We are dismayed at the U.S. administration's firing of independent justice officials, failure to fully comply with court orders, the rollback of policies and programs on climate change as well as equality, inclusion, and diversity, retrogressions to the human rights of women and girls, the demonization of transgender people, persecution and forced deportation of migrants, threats to journalists, students, and freedom of expression more generally, censoring and removal of public information, and lack of transparency and blatant disregard of public accountability for its actions. We are also distressed by the problematic role of leading business actors in the U.S. administration, who are exerting undue influence without any mechanisms to prevent conflicts of interest. This opens the door to corporate capture of the U.S. government and further weakens the independent responsibility of businesses and other private entities to respect human rights and the environment. In today's globalized and multipolar world, no country can function without international cooperation and respect for international law. Collective actions premised upon mutual respect and international solidarity are required to overcome pressing global challenges. We urge the U.S. administration to reconsider its policies, particularly in light of its own history with struggles for freedom and equality, and its valuable contributions to the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the current multilateral system. Now more than ever, it is the time for states, civil society, businesses, and all people who believe in the value of rule of international law, justice, human rights, peace and security, and sustainable development to come together to vehemently defend these core values and the institutions that safeguard them. We remain ready to work constructively with the United States and other states to create a world that is safe, peaceful, just, equal, inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous for everyone.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and recommend it to your friends and family by sharing the link.
We'd like to thank all the women mentioned today for their contributions to gender equality, to the fight against witchcraft accusations, and to our podcast, Witch Hunt.
We dedicate this episode to those suffering and dying due to gender inequality worldwide.
If you would like to support our work, please consider making a donation at endwitchhunts.org/donate.
Have a great today and accelerate action so all of us get to share in a beautiful tomorrow.